going to be recorded as of now, that will then be available via HCSA at some point. I'm not sure when exactly we'll be able to get that out, but it will be out as soon as we possibly can do that. So good afternoon and welcome. For those of you who want a quick giggle, I actually launched this at 1 o'clock this afternoon and started talking to people who weren't there. We all make mistakes. There's mine up front. Never have I turned up 2 hours early for a webinar. So welcome to this session, which is about how to feel good even in stressful times, which we've all had quite an interesting experience and still are over the last few months, weeks, and however long it may be going forward. And the intent from myself anyway during this session is to give you some ways of being able to help yourself as we move forward. Now, you have already shown that you all seem pretty adept and pretty fast in relation to how this works on Zoom, but I just wanted to check in case you know, if you want to ask me a question, then make sure that you have this bit sorted so that it goes to panelists. It says panelists, but I am the only panelist on this, so it will come privately to me. And if you're asking a question, I will just ask the question and not cite anybody's names, so it keeps anonymity there. But if you want it to go in front of everybody, then you know, feel free to do that. If you want to just say hi and chat to everybody, please do. I do have a request. And this is for you, this is not for me because I won't be distracted by it, but I would encourage you, and I recognise this may not be possible because you might be on call, but switch anything off that might be distracting you, any notifications, emails, social media, toddlers if you can stop them knocking on the door, whatever it may be, but stop that for this moment in time to give you the space to be here, because I am pretty sure that you have got enough things that you could be getting on with right now. So the fact that you are taking the time to be here, then take the time to be here and engage as much as you want to. Ask questions throughout, comment on things throughout, let me know if they're making sense, etc., etc. So as I said, I've got a fair bit of content that I want to power through with this, and it's going to be roughly about 45 minutes, depending on where we're at with regard to the questions. But if we get to the point and you're thinking, I've got loads of questions, or I've got a question that's not being answered, then there's two things I want to draw your attention to, one of which I will mention at the end as well. I've just put it into the chat box at this now, and that is the link for the webinar, which is at this time again next Wednesday, and they are two separate webinars giving you different tools, but that would be a useful thing for you to do because that may answer some of your questions. But equally, when you registered, you also will have had my email address. So if you have got questions, some of you have already experienced and recognized that you can do that, which is amazing. Email me and I will do my best to respond to those. I want to be here to support you as best as I possibly can. So I can't do that unless you interact with me in that sense, both on this call, on this webinar, and also off it as well. So you will need some kind of pen, paper, notebook, whatever it is, in order to be able to work through this, because I am going to take you through some specific sessions and exercises in order to give you the opportunity to experience things. And the purpose of doing that is because it will give you an insight for yourself, and then once you know the tools, because there's two specific tools I'm going to share with you today, but once you know how to use them for yourself, it then becomes much easier for you to be able to share those with your team, family members, friends, whoever it may be. So grab yourself, I'm waffling to give you an opportunity to scrabble around and grab yourself a pen and paper, but make sure that you've got those with you. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge where and how these webinars have come about. So they are being fully sponsored by Fortrus, and Fortrus have wanted to support those of you that are in procurement and have been working so diligently and hard over the last few weeks, and that was their way of being able to do that. And HCSA have been amazing in supporting with promoting, putting it out to their members, and they're also hosting the recording moving forward. So if it wasn't for both Fortrus and HCSA, then this wouldn't be reaching you right now. So I am extremely grateful for them putting this forward. And some of you may have met me. I spoke at the HCSA conference last November about using your brain for change, interestingly. So you may have met me before, but this, if you haven't, then I'm a coach. My name's Jules Wyman, obviously. I'm a coach and a speaker, and I focus on a number of different topics, but they all intertwine. And majority of the time, it usually is around confidence and confidence matters. However, over the last few weeks with what's been going on, I very much have been focusing on uncertainty, fear, stress, worries, and everything, anxiety that's all been connected to that because of what's been happening for people. And that's what I always like to do in however I'm working, whether I'm working one-on-one or whether I'm speaking one-to-many, is my intent is always to give you as many tools as I possibly can in the time frame I have that are applicable to your situation that you can immediately apply. So without further ado, that's where I want us to head to, is looking at tools, because very often what we don't do, and especially, I mean, I know some of you have been working 16-hour days, you've been working weekends, you've been working extremely hard, and that doesn't always give us the opportunity to just do this and just give ourselves some space to reflect. And that's why I'm inviting you to switch anything off that might distract you, so that you can just pigeonhole this bit of time so that you can reflect on what's been going on. And that's going to be the first thing that I want us to look at. So I'd like you to cast your mind back to the 1st of January, which may seem like about 3,000 years ago. I know certainly to me, it seems like a very long time ago now. But think back to that, because I have a sneaking suspicion that you may have made New Year's resolutions, or you may have put some plans in place, you may have had holidays booked, whatever it may be, but think back to that point. And in relation to these two questions here, is I would like you to think about what was working for you in relation to work and your home life, and what wasn't working for you in relation to your work and home life. Now, I'm going to keep talking a little bit as well. And what I'd encourage you to do is just kind of listen, have that kind of noise going on in the background. That's me speaking, but write down your answers for that. What was working for you back at the 1st of January? What were the things that were really working for you in relation to work and home life? And what were the things that weren't working for you in relation to those two things? The purpose of doing this, by the way, is that often we can end up looking back and reflecting on things in through rose-tinted glasses. And so that's why we end up hankering over, oh, if we could go back to how things were. And actually, if we stop and look at, and this is an exercise I've been taking a number of my clients through, and every single time people are looking at it and going, oh, that's giving me a clearer view and a clearer memory of what was happening. So that's the purpose of doing it. And it's also just a purpose, it's like a check-in. It's like a reference point of this is where I was. It's like when you're doing a long distance walk, especially if you're walking up a big hill or a mountain. Sometimes you're so focused on where you are and where you're moving that you forget to stop and just look back and go, oh, look at how far I've come. And that's what this does, is it gives you that recognition, because you're so bogged down in what's going on at this moment in time. So hopefully that's given you enough time to write some answers there. Obviously, if you're watching this on the recording or listening to it on the recording, you can always hit pause and keep writing if you've got more answers. But I'm going to move on purely because of the time constraints that we have, and invite you to think about, as we turned into the 1st of June this week even, and think about, in relation again to your work and your home, what is currently working for you and what isn't working for you. So here are some of the things that when I've been listening to people who work in procurement and also within the NHS, the broader spectrum of the NHS, these are some of the things that they've been mentioning and reflecting on, of what's been, and it could go into either of these questions. You know, their relationship with their colleagues and how that's shifted, and what things have been working and what things haven't been working. The relationship with their suppliers, how that's been working or not working. It may be around the hours as well. Some people might be thriving on the longer hours and working at weekends. Other people may not. That may be putting on added pressure. What about working at home? Is that something that is working for you or not working for you? What about the being able to be in the office but having to do the social distancing? How's that going? thinking about the different ways of working with suppliers, for example, and different terms and conditions or contracts or payment structures or payment plans, anything like that. What out of that is and now currently working or not working for you? And as again, if you are if you've got loads more answers and I'm moving too fast, then just jot down the questions or screen grab the questions if you want to, and then you can always go back and be looking at this, because it's helpful for us to keep doing this and keep moving and looking at it in a different way. So the next question then is to be thinking about, when you've got those two answers from January and then also from June, is to be looking at how, when you've got those two together, what can you see, what can you learn from those, and how can you move forward with those answers? Because there may be some things from January that were really working that you've forgotten about, and you may be able to bring those into the current situation. You may not, but there may be things that weren't working in January that you still haven't altered that you could. And thinking about it now, what's working for you? How can you do more of that? How can you share that with other people? And those things that aren't working, okay, is there any kind of conversation, anything that could happen with those that's going to make a difference? Whether it's conversation with family members, work colleagues, whether it's your manager, whatever it is there anything that needs adapting in that sense? And if you've got any questions or anything that you want to share, just a reminder again, feel free to put it into the chat box as we go through this. The things that again, I'm pulling on some of the things that in various industries actually that I've heard, but specifically, you know, if you think about what you've learned about procurement now versus what you thought about procurement in January, that could well have shifted. It may be as well thinking about the different levels that you're working with. You may be interacting more with clinical staff than you have done before, or maybe it's different band levels that you haven't been interacting with before, and that's something that you've learned. It may be about your own adaptability and that you didn't think that you were somebody who could adapt. I mean, very often when we're in this kind of point of change, is that we don't think about, if we go back, sort of like if I said to you in January, oh, by the way, you're going to have to deal with this, I would guess that the majority of you would go, I won't be able to do that. And yet when we're in that situation, we find a way, we find a way through it. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. But it's also about things like, you know, what have you learned in relation to your family situation with working from home as well, whatever structure that might be, and there's so many of those. But, you know, with the different routines, with a commute or not with a commute, you know, how are these things? What have you learned from them, and how can you use that moving forward? And then finally, to be looking at is to get really specific about how you've adapted over the last 6 months. What are the things that you are doing now that you didn't know in January? So, for example, it may be software. How many of you even knew that Zoom existed in January? I've been using Zoom for years, but not in the webinar context like this. I just usually use it in meetings. So learning how to do things like this, which I only learned a couple of weeks ago. So that's that adaptability. You may be using Teams, or it may be that you've never worked from home before and the adaptability there. It may be that you've never homeschooled and that you've had to bring that into your working life. And, you know, all of these different things that you've adapted to. And by the way, just recognize I'm not saying that you've adapted and done it perfectly, brilliantly, spot on, great, just that you have adapted, and you may still be adapting and still learning, and it may not be comfortable and it may not be easy, but that's not what I'm asking. It's just about you acknowledging how you're adapting and what that adaptability specifically is. And there's a reason for going through all of this process, because these questions here, especially these top three, this one obviously is a bit more pertinent to the situation that we're in at the moment, but those top three there, they're questions actually you could use when you go to bed, you know, 5 minutes before you go to bed. If you can write it down, if you're somebody who does journaling, perfect, you could use these three questions. If you're not, you could just, you know, as you're kind of brushing your teeth before you go to bed, okay, be thinking about what's worked for me today? What's really been working? What didn't work when I snapped back at that person, or when I thought I couldn't do it and then didn't find an answer? What have I learned? Actually, I can do things in a different way, but whatever it may be. And then how can I use that tomorrow? And that is a great thing to do before you go to bed. It doesn't need to take more than 3 to 5 minutes. Just thinking those things through, writing it down adds an extra bonus level. Talking it out is another bonus level. So if you've got a partner that you could talk that through, or another family member or friend you can talk that through, great, because it's going to give you an opportunity to start be thinking, this is working, so I need more of that. That's not working, so how can I let go of that? And then you're already then thinking into the future of how you can plan that moving forward. Let me know if this is making sense, by the way, either by giving me, if you've got the reactions button at the bottom, you can give me a reaction there. Or if not, just put a yes in the, or there's a hands up. Thank you very much. You can do it that way if you prefer as well. So there's loads of hands going up. Awesome. Brilliant. Look at that. You guys are absolutely so speedy. Look at that. Okay, fabulous. I'm going to lower everyone's hands now. Thank you. Much appreciated. So it's making sense. That is a bonus. So the reason that I'm talking about all of that and this specific process is because we don't then spend enough time, because we tend to rush from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And then before we know it, it's Christmas, and it will be. Think of how quickly it's gone between January and June. I'm sorry, but it ain't going to go, it's going to be just as quick going in the other direction. So maybe don't put your winter woolies away. But if we don't do that, if we don't just take those little moments of pausing and reflecting, and it doesn't have to take hours on end, then we're not giving ourselves any acknowledgement. And what we can end up doing is waiting for that acknowledgement and praise to come from other people. Now, you may be one of the many, many lucky people who have amazing peers and amazing bosses around you that have shown their gratitude, that have, whether it's coming from the operational side or the clinical side, coming down and telling you how great they are, or sending you cards or emails or whatever it may be. And that is wonderful, don't get me wrong. And I'm acutely aware, as somebody who doesn't work within your industry, but works with a lot of people within your industry, that you've also, procurement team in particular, have come under quite a significant bashing, shall we say, from the press in relation to PPE and how that's been procured or not procured, or however they've worded it. And that's not the kind of gratitude that we really want to get. That's not the acknowledgement that we've especially when you're working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, some of you, and I know some of you have, that's not what we want. But if we're waiting to get that from the outside world, then actually we could be waiting for quite a long time. So that's where we need to start. Where's that? Let me point in the right direction. This little guy. That's where we need to be saying thank you to ourselves, or acknowledging ourselves. Now, I managed to do something yesterday which I've never ever done before in the work context. And this is no word of a lie, confession time. I literally sat here in my office and went, well done me. That's all I needed. Tiny bit of acknowledgement, took seconds. But how often do you do that? Give yourself a genuine pat on the back, or just go, do you know what? Well done. I've got through today. And those questions that I was sharing beforehand, the what worked, what didn't work, what can I learn? How can I use that moving forward? That's just such a great way of acknowledging what's happening and giving yourself that recognition. And the thing that I relate it to when I'm working with, whether it's procurement, informatics or finance, especially within the NHS, is my previous job. So I used to be a stage manager. This kind of was my view pretty much every day for 10 years. And I worked in theatre all over the country. And I'm pretty sure you've been to see a live show of some description. It may not have been in a theatre, it doesn't matter, but you're applauding the person on the stage. You're applauding the person who's doing the performance. And we forget about all the other people that have been involved to put that on, whether it's the front of house staff, the bar staff, the people in marketing, the people who have been in finance, the other people in admin. There's so many other people backstage. There's the technicians, the sound, the lighting, etc., etc., etc. And that can get forgotten. So I do appreciate that potentially sometimes we want that applause. And you may be taking that in from the Thursday night applause. But if you really want to make sure that you're getting it, give it to yourself, acknowledge yourself and just go, yeah, It's been tough, and I've had to adapt at an extremely fast pace, which I didn't think I was capable of, or maybe you knew you were capable of, and it's just great to see. So make sure that you're doing that for yourself rather than waiting for somebody else to be able to do that. So that's the first tool that I wanted to share with you. The second tool that I want to share with you, I learned from this guy here. Some of you may know, his name's Tony Robbins. If you want to understand a bit more of his work, there is a documentary on Netflix called I Am Not Your Guru. And I think it was about maybe nearly 10, 15 years ago that I first learned this tool from him in relation to understanding your emotional state and how you can take control of your emotional state and therefore feel good more often. And it's important for us to understand that the kind of the way that we're conditioned with things is that the outside world is what makes us feel whatever it is that we're feeling, whatever emotion it is that we're going through. And in actual fact, what we need to remember is that we can take control of our emotions, and this is what helps you do it. This triad is what helps you do it. So in the middle, this little guy here is to represent your emotional state and thinking about your emotional state. And the first thing that I want us to focus on is focus, and to really specifically be thinking about that whatever you focus on expands. And I'll give you a real world example of this right now. So what I'd love you to do is I'd love you to think about your big left toe. Okay, so give all of your attention to your big left toe. Some of you may be actually waggling it right now, but think about your big left toe. So you might be able to feel whether it's got any material touching it, whether it's barefoot, whether it's on the floor, whatever it may be. But think about your big left toe. You might just be able to feel the other toe rubbing up against it. Think about your big left toe. Some of you may be getting an image of it, and if it's got painted nail or whatever it may be, you may be thinking about your big left toe right now. And whilst that's had your attention, you've completely forgotten, until I say it, about your big right toe. And in that moment, that split second, what you might have noticed is your big left toe felt slightly bigger than your big right toe. And it's not obviously because it was, but it's had so much attention that when you focus on something, it's the whole, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Something with something you're giving it the attention and focus and focus and focus, it just expands and expands and expands. And by doing that, everything else disappears. So I'm going to give you a second to look around wherever you are right now and just have a look for the color blue. Okay? Spot everything that you can wherever you are that is the color blue. You're looking for the color blue. That's all you're looking for, is the color blue. Okay, have you got it? The color blue? Okay, now close your eyes if it's safe for you to do so. And remember the room that you're in, and think about all the things that you can remember now that were red. Now, I did this with a client yesterday, and this is our first session, and she did exactly what most people do when I said, now think about red. And she kind of went, huh, what? You said blue. And I said, I know. But did you notice that in that moment that I said, look, now how many things can you remember that are red, that your brain got confused and was a bit like, hang on a second, that's not what I was looking for. But what you were focusing on was the blue. So therefore, that's all your brain was picking up on, because that was the information. It's a bit like any search engine. If you put into a search engine blue and hit search, it's going to come up with the color blue and then other things that might be blue, like the pop band. And it's then just going to keep going with that. You're going to have to scroll past page and page and page and page before you start getting into other colors. And how many of us, in all honesty, go past page one? How many of us go past the first few things on page one? It's kind of human psychology, unfortunately, of what we do. We're lazy where that's concerned. But this is how the brain works. What you're focusing on is what's going to be brought in, what you're thinking about and focusing on is going to be brought into attention. So we need to be very mindful of how that happens, because very often what we end up saying is things like, I don't want to be stressed. I don't want to worry. I don't want to be fearful. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to be anxious. Well, I don't want you to think about a pink elephant. See, it says, don't search for a pink elephant. And I did this yesterday, so this is fresh, both on the images page and the other page. This is what happens. You ask any search engine, don't search for a pink elephant, and it gives you a pink elephant. So if you're asking your brain, don't search for stress, don't think about anxiety, don't think about worry, don't think about fear, don't think about I can't do this. That's actually what it's looking for. So that's why you end up buffing up against things time and time again. And that's where our frustration can then perpetuate, because we're like, oh, I just don't want to be stressed. Why am I stressed? I'm more stressed now, because actually we're programming it to look for it. So we need to be very mindful about that. And I'm going to give you a recipe of how you can use this as we go through. So don't worry about that. So the next thing that I would like us to think about is, which you probably saw when I flashed it up a moment ago, is our language. And a lot of the time, I would say most of the time, actually, we don't think about our language. We tend to, the people over the 15 years that I've been doing this, people tend to think more about their written language, especially if they're sharing that with somebody else via an email, a report, presentation, whatever. But we don't really tend to think that much about the wording of things. And specifically, not just about what's coming out here, but what's going on up here. So it's about the communication between you and everyone else. So we need to think about that languaging, because if you're caught up in, as just I was saying, if that focus is around I don't want to be stressed, I'm going to get this wrong, I'm going to fail, it's not going to be perfect, whatever it is, that kind of language is going to have an impact, and we need to be very mindful of that, and therefore then choose and focus on the kind of language that's going to be helpful. And I'm not a big fan of languaging which is around oh my god, I'm awesome, I'm amazing, I'm the best. I'm not personally a big fan of that. I'm personally more inclined to go for things that I believe are closer to the truth, such as I am safe, I am okay, I can do this, and I will find a way. Now, I mentioned I will find a way earlier when I was talking about that when you're facing something that you hadn't done before. So like if I'd have said to you in January that you were going to be doing X, Y, and Z right the way through till now, and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have been able to do that. You might have been, yeah, but I will find a way. And interesting enough, this phrase has come about because whenever I'm working with a client who is getting stuck facing a really difficult situation for them at that moment, is I always get them to reflect on a situation where they've been through in the past, and how did they get through that? How did they get from where they were to where they are now? And they can list all these different things, and they'll go, well, you know, I just found a way. I didn't know how to do it initially, but I found a way. So if I'm thinking about this current situation from a work perspective and kind of going, I don't know how to deal with this. I didn't know 3 months ago, 3 months ago, I didn't know how to run webinars in this way. I'd never run them. And I just kept saying to myself, anytime my thinking was like, oh, I just kept going, I'll find a way. I'll find a way how to do them. I'll learn how to do it. It's fine. I'll find a way. And when you've got that, what it does is it frees up your thinking for you to start being in a far more resourceful emotional state to therefore then find the answers that you're looking for. It helps calm you down, helps calm the nervous system down. The I'm safe phrase is very useful, because if you are, from a psychological perspective, telling yourself, your thinking mind is telling yourself that I'm not safe, then that's going to trigger your primal mind into thinking that you're not safe and therefore you're in danger and going to die. So the thing that I always do with clients, and this is something that you're going to need to interpret for yourself in this current climate, to do with your perception and also the locality of where you're working and how things are there, is actually check around you and go, okay, am I safe? And do I perceive that I'm safe? So if you're someone that for you that safety will be around you wearing a mask or having gloves or always making sure that you've got that 2 meters distance, then that's okay. That's you recognizing that's where you're at and that's what you want to do. But it's making sure that you're doing that and then just going, I am okay. What our thinking can go into is, yeah, but what if? And yeah, but what if? And yeah, but what if? But the yeah, but what if is in the future. It's, am I safe right now? Am I okay right now? And the majority of the time, the majority of us are. We're very lucky. So be aware of that and utilize language that's going to help you have a much calmer, more resourceful, helpful emotional state to be thinking, working and being from. So I do know that I'm going quite fast through this, so please do, I can see that there are some questions coming in, but please do let me know if this is making sense for you, or if you've got any questions or comments, then do put that into the comment sections as well. So I'm assuming that if the raised hand is other than let me know that it makes sense, then put your question in the comments, in the chat box, or in the question section. Yeah, there's hands going up. So I'm assuming that that's all just saying it's making sense. Awesome. Great. Thank you very much, guys. Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on then to the last part of this triad, except I'm pressing the wrong button here. There we go. So the last part is your physiology, so how you are physically. I do presentation skills training, and one of the things I get asked very often is about body language. You know, how should I hold my hands? How should my feet be? When should I do this? What should I do with them? Da, da, da. My usual advice with that is around be as open as possible, because it's about how the other person's interpreting you, but ultimately just be relaxed, because unless you're going to really study it, it's too much in depth for you to, and if you are presenting a lot and that's important to you, I would advise you to go and do that. But if you if it's just a normal kind of presentation, I would actually advise you more to work on being relaxed, because that's when you come across at your best, whoever you are. It's that authenticity that we connect with. But where body language is concerned, a lot of the time we don't tend to think about the body language and how that body language communicates to this thinking mind and the impact that it therefore has on our emotional state. So what I'd like you to do is, as long as you're comfortable to do so, I recognise some of you may be in the working environment of the office and may not feel comfortable to do this, but if you can, in some way, shape or form, I'd invite you to do so. Because what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about being stressed or anxious or worried, whatever that is the right word for you, and move your body into the position that you would be if you were stressed, worried or anxious. I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to make an assumption that you have done something like that. So my guess is that there's going to be some kind of head in the hands, or it might be, you know, shrinking in. It may be a slump forward. It may be. It's usually something that it's like the kind of the themes around it is it's shrinking away from the outside world and kind of shrinking in to protect yourself. That tends to be the physiological impact. Now, if you had stayed like that, because hopefully you've shifted, but if you had stayed like that, then what that might show you is that after a while, you stay in that position. It doesn't even have to be that long, 30, 60, 90 seconds. Your thinking then goes, oh, look, there's tension there, there's stress there, I must get stressed. The thinking then joins in with that, and then before you know it, you've got the chemicals, whether it be adrenaline or cortisol or whatever else may be going around, that's then going to exacerbate exactly the same thing that you're talking about. How your body language is. So we need to be very mindful of what can happen in that instance, because it's very interesting. There's been studies done that as to what happens when people are joyful. And when people are joyful, what they tend to do is lift their hands up, right? They tend to go upwards. We jump for joy. Okay. And they even studied to the point of what somebody who had been born blind, what do they do to celebrate? What happens to their hands? And they do the same thing. So it's a natural thing that we go upwards. Now, I'm not saying that you walk around like this or that you go around jumping about like this little guy here, but it's about recognizing that if you are not in a great emotional state, you might need to move your body, go for a walk, go for a run, go for a cycle, or it may be a case of putting your favorite track on and dancing around the house. Fair enough, you may be in the office and none of those things are appropriate at that moment in time, but even walking and going, making yourself a drink, and whilst you're, you know, waiting for the kettle to boil or whatever how the setup may be where you are, is just straighten yourself up, just shift your body so that you are head up, eyes up, shoulders back, and start taking some nice deep breaths, because that's going to have an impact on your physiology. So let's whiz through and show you the recipe for how this all works. If you wanted to create stress, which, you know, let's face it, none of us really do. But my guess is if you're looking at the recipe would be something along the lines of this. So it's going to be focusing on some kind of overwhelm as to, you know, I've got all these things to do, I'm not got enough time to get them done, and there's too much to do. It's going to be sort of like the languaging that's going on. You might even notice, one of my clients said to me the other week about, I've never got enough time. And I said, just try something for the next 7 days, is every time you hear that, just correct it to, actually, I've got plenty of time. And she did that every day for 7 days until we spoke again. And she said, I can't believe the difference. I've been early for things and all sorts. I've always got plenty of time. I'm always there on time. Big shift. Just by changing that dialogue, created a different emotion, and then that was it. Things shifted. And make that, if you look at it from that recipe of how this little guy is, of, you know, that's all of those things combined, and it may be one gets more attention than the other. You don't have to be doing all three for the recipe to be in place, but kind of would be. This one, the whole physiology thing can get shifted because we can end up putting those masks on and pretending everything's okay when it may not be necessarily. So it's really worth looking at for yourself. If you are stressed, anxious, worried, whatever the word may be, fearful, it's really worth drawing yourself a triangle when you're in that state, if possible, and go, okay, what am I focusing on? What's my language like? How's my body? And actually fill it in. So you've got clear indicators to look out for. Physiology for me is always my go-to. It's always my go-to. Let me check there first, because that in any situation is the quickest and easiest thing to change. I personally find. You may find it different. So it's not that you have to work on all of them. It's not that you have to do all of them to make a change to whatever you want in the middle here. But the more you can know about them, the more control that you get. And I know some of you will like control that's going to give you. So if you want to change this and you want to feel good more often, let's say, for example, you wanted to feel calm, then you create another recipe. And it may be that you sit and work it out first and have a play around with it. So if you wanted to experience calm, my assumption is that what you would need to be focusing on is one thing at a time. What's the one thing that needs my attention right now? What's the one thing that needs my attention right now? What needs my attention right now in every single moment, rather than that big long list? You know, you go back to, where is it? There we go. We go back to this languaging. As I said, for me, I will find a way is one of my mantras now. I'll find a way. Even when I have been lost in a city and I haven't got a map, I will find where I need to go. And you know what? I always do. I always do. So it's using these to be able to help yourself. And the same thing with this little guy here is, it may be simply just having a stretch might make a difference. Okay. I got, just a few weeks ago now, but I was really challenged with something that was going on in the office. And I was like, I'm banging my head against a brick wall, metaphorically, not literally. And so left the office, went down the 4 flights of stairs, walked literally round the building and came back up the 4 flights of stairs and went, right, now. So that physiological change, simple, took me less than 5 minutes, helped me to get into a different emotional state in order to be able to do what I needed to do. So that's your second tool. That's the recipe, and be able to do it. And by the way, the quickest and simplest thing, as I've said here, that you can do is use your breath. Take as slow and as deep a breath as you possibly can, at least 3 before you move on to the next thing. Train yourself to be able to do that, and that's going to help you make some shifts. So let's have a quick recap of both of the tools before I have a look at some of the questions that have come in and do my best to answer those. So the first thing is looking at utilising all of those questions so that you can then really celebrate you and acknowledge. You don't have to post on social media. You don't have to take an ad out in the paper or whatever it may be. This is just acknowledgement for you, giving yourself that literal pat on the back and recognition for what you have done, how you are adapting, and remembering it's not about it being perfect, not a meaning that you're getting it right all the time. It's meaning that you have been having a go, and keep working, keep evolving, keep changing with the situation as things have been. And then the next thing is about making sure, and by the way, it may not be calm. Your middle word may not be calm. It may be confident. It may be cheerful. It could be anything. Doesn't matter what that is, but then look, use all of those. I can't work out how to do it. There we go. Work out what would I need to focus on in order to get whatever I've put in the middle there. How would my language need to be in order for me to get whatever I want in the middle there? How would my body need to be in order for me to get whatever it is in the middle? Make sense? Cool. Okay, so let's have a look at what your questions are. And I probably need to do that. So any tips to process things outside of our control in this context, e.g. holidays being our happy place or being overseas from family? Okay, so what would I suggest with that? First thing I would suggest is sign up to next week's webinar if you haven't done so already, because one of the tools I will definitely be using there will help you. But I would also look at, so in relation to holidays being our happy place, and I get that, there's, you know, it would be lovely if I would quite enjoy going to Spain right now, or any of the other magical places that I've been to in my life. And obviously that's not viable for me to be able to do, or even going down and seeing my mum, who I haven't seen for 6 months. So that's it. Whilst it's not possible for us to do those things, what is possible is for us to find a different happy place at the moment. So it might be utilizing the triad and going, okay, if happy is what I put in the middle, what could I focus on? So I could, for example, so I've got a painting up on my wall here in the office. One of my clients this week said she was looking at it, she's like, oh, do you know what? I can't go to the beach, but I'm just going to sit and look at that and imagine that I'm there. And within 5 seconds, she was like, oh, that's nice. Now, she wasn't in the beach. She was in my office in the centre of York. So it might be that your focus is, well, let's look at let's go through some of the photos, or let's go back through some of the memories. And again, if it's being away from family, it might be, okay, well, my focus is how can I connect with them, which I'm probably sure that you are doing. And then how can I language it, which is, I miss you and I'm grateful that I can still speak to you via phone or via Zoom or whatever it is that you may be. So I hope that that's answered your question. Let me know if it hasn't. I've taken those off and now I'm struggling to read. I wonder if you have any advice for someone who works out of work with mental health issues. Returned to work in March and was sent home to isolate 3 weeks later. Nightmare scenario. Seems like I'm back to square one, getting paid but no engagement with people other than Teams, which is horrible. Okay, so again, I would highly recommend that you come on next week's webinar, because the tool, one of the main, I think I'll be doing two tools. There's definitely one tool, but there'll probably be 2, if not 3. But one of the tools that I'll be teaching you next week can help with this in a different way. And what I would maybe say is start looking at what's the one thing I can do and what's the one thing I want to give my attention to. So find something that lights you up, something that gives you joy. So different situation, but it's the only thing that I can relate it to in what you're describing. And that is that a couple of years ago, I was ill and taken into hospital and therefore then couldn't work for quite some time. And I live on my own. And I remember there are a number of times when I was like, oh, this is awful, I'm all on my own. And I haven't got enough strength to go and make myself a cup of tea. What I did with the triad is I very much looked at, okay, well, what's going to help my focus? What's going to help me at least feel okay? What would help, what focus? And therefore then start asking myself, what can I do? And I very simply started doing things like, okay, well, I can sit and draw, I can sit and read. I found certain things that I love doing, and I had a number of them. Because there were some times when I just didn't want to read, or there were sometimes I didn't want to draw. So if I've got a number of them, then I've got a selection box to be able to choose from. So that would be a very short answer to a big question. But please feel free, as I said at the beginning, to email me, and I will do my best to point people either to other resources where I can help you. You can find me on Facebook on Jules Wyman Confidence Coach. And I do a Facebook Live every Monday night at 7 p.m. And that's a kind of great question that I would answer for people on there. And again, I can do those anonymously as well. Oh, could I cover any techniques to de-escalate aggressive or distressed patients or staff? That would be really useful. Do you know what? Can I take that question and have a really good think about that, because that's not not a direction that I would have used the tools that I've got. Off the top of my head, one of the things that I would say for you to practice to do is to, however their breathing is to do your best to get in Google or use any other search engine, rapport, and look at rapport exercises, because what can help in that situation is getting into rapport with somebody, and a great way to do that where that they may not notice is their breathing. So if you match their breathing, once you've got into alignment with it, what you can then do is you can then start to slow it down, and that can help calm somebody down without them realizing that that's what you're doing. And that's sounds manipulative, but it's in a helpful way. So, but that's a much bigger question as well. So I'm just going to do, oops, that's the one I wanted. I'm just going to grab that, and I will look at that in a much deeper way. So whoever's messaged that in, if you are happy to email me that as well, I will come up with some other ideas. And if I can include it in next week's webinar, then I will. So any tips on dealing with critical, difficult person from work who is right about everything when they are wrong? Again, that's a challenging one. Let me have a think about that one. I'm conscious of time, so I think that's a very big one for me to answer. I've taken a capture of that one, and see what I can do with that, because that's a very big thing. But maybe the rapport exercises would be a good thing to be able to help with that as well. Yes, thanks, Jules. Please cover on other sessions would be useful. We will be sending out, thanks, it's an anonymous, so I have no idea who that is, but you're welcome. My neighbour has been looking at countryside and beach footage on YouTube during lockdown. It worked well for him. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that you can do as well, thank you for that. The other thing that you can do is something that has been well researched in a way that calms people down, is nature sounds, and more specifically bird music. So bird song, so naturally birds tweeting and that kind of thing. Because the primal side of our brain that is wired to pick up on things like that is when birds go really quiet and there's no sound, primarily we're like, what's going on, what's coming? But if we can hear it just gently in the background, we're like, okay, it's cool, everything's all right. So I'm just wondering, actually, thinking aloud, as to whether that might be possible for you to do in the workplace, as to whether it's something that you could have playing in the background at like a very, very low level of just having some calming bird music. There was a place, and if I can find the link for it, then I will put it in the email that will have the survey that we'll need you to complete to give us feedback on this, where it's like a radio station and it just plays birdsong, and it's free, and you can put it on Eternal, and it just plays over and over and over again. So if I can find the link for that, then I will do so. So any tips on how to deal with an unfounded fear of my boss? She's actually very reasonable, but I'm affected by hierarchy and often panic. It makes me look unsure of myself. That's such a brilliant question. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to make this the last one that I answer, just as I say, purely because of time. And for those of you that have your hands up, if you want to ask a question, please can you type it in for me, because then that helps me keep your anonymity. So in relation to that, so if it's an unfounded fear, again, I'm going to say, please join the webinar next week, because the tool that I'm banging on about will definitely help you where that is concerned. And I would also say, let me scooch back to the triad. Whoops, there we go. Really take the time to go through this, and your word that you might put in the middle there is secure or comfortable or confident or reassured or strong or whatever the right word is for you, and work out what it is, and come up with, when it comes to this, come up with a simple, very short, whether it's I'm okay, or I can do this, or that sort of thing would really help you there. And also get something physically. I would again go back to your breathing. Do you know what? She's reasonable. My boss is reasonable. My boss is reasonable. My boss is reasonable. Because that's going to help you just reassure yourself and give yourself that recognition that the other stuff that's going on is just not helpful. But definitely make sure that you register for next week. I don't think I need to type it in because it's we haven't got a huge amount of conversation in the chat box. So it is right at the top. There is that link for next week's webinar, which is dealing with fear, worries, pressure, both big and small. So it's at 3 p.m. Note to myself, not come on at 1 o'clock, to 3 p.m. next Wednesday. Make sure that you register as well, again, and share with your colleagues to be able to do this. Again, I want to say thank you to Fortrus and to HCSA for their support in making this happen. And I know that they would value your feedback. So we're going to get a survey out to you. It'll be very quick, short. Please give us your feedback so that we can see as what it is that you need. You've asked some awesome questions. What is it that you need? What's going to support you best with the situation you're at this moment in time? How can we help you? Because that's the thing, that whether it's coming from an HCSA angle, Fortrus angle, or from a Jules Wyman angle, how best can we help you? What is it that you need? So please feel free to let us know. You are welcome. Thank you for letting me know that this session has been really useful, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. And in the meantime, please do take care of yourself, and let's face it, in a world where you can be anything, please at least be kind. Take care. Bye now.